So I'm going to take a little bit of time to equip you with some of the knowledge that you need to be confident that what you're doing here today is right and just, and the science is completely on your side. So before I do that, I just want to acknowledge my wife is here with me today, which I really appreciate. She's been the rock solid foundation for our family. This affects all of us, and we all know how much it affects our families. It's actually her birthday today, and but she wanted to be here to support you. And then I also want to introduce somebody special, very special to us. I have one older son who's at home. He's thrilled to have the house to himself for a few days. But we have another son, and this is him here, and he's going to let you know what his name is.
I got my missile Bridle.
And so this is Johnny Bridle. And I want you to know that our son Johnny, he's got a superpower, and he's going to tell you what his superpower is.
It's a worm. I got my muscle spade.
All right, so if you didn't hear that, he has Down syndrome. And the reason why I bring this up is we had an interesting thing occur. 2 days ago, we went and spoke near Toronto. And on our way, we stopped by Tim Hortons. And the reason why we stopped by Tim Hortons is because they were selling what are called Choose to Include donuts. And these donuts were to promote inclusion. And they were to represent and honor and show respect towards people who have different abilities and special needs. And so I got those donuts to celebrate with my son because I love him and I'm proud of him. But what I want to tell you is this highlighted everything that's wrong right now in Canada. Because as we purchased those inclusion donuts at Tim Hortons, we were buying them from a restaurant that was segregating us. And we were buying this, all the proceeds were going towards Special Olympics Ontario. I've had nothing but the utmost respect my whole life for Special Olympics Ontario. And I support everybody with special needs. However, they're segregating us as well. Johnny is no longer allowed to do a Special Olympics basketball or his Special Olympics soccer. I can't coach the hockey team in our city that has children with special needs. And one of their star players can't play on the team. So I bought the donut under a bit of protest. Again, I support people with special needs. And the other thing I want to let you know is children with special needs are being used, especially right now, for fear-mongering and trying to get the vaccine in the arms of all kinds of children. They're saying that individuals, for example, Down syndrome, are at incredibly high risk. Children, and all adults are not at high risk, and I'm going to tell you why, especially when it comes to Omicron. But they have to stop this fear-mongering. You may have seen a commercial on television at the end of it when they're promoting the vaccination of children. What they do is they show a boy with Down syndrome, and they're doing that on purpose because this is a population, and they're trying to take advantage of that population to make other parents feel forced to vaccinate their kids. Even kids with Down syndrome are not at high risk from this COVID-19, okay? So I want you to understand that. Now, I've been sharing my concerns for 2 years now about the science as I've seen it evolving. And I have to tell you, I really appreciate it because 3 days ago, I stood on one of the bridges for 6 hours to watch the truckers go by. And it was the first time in 2 years that I felt real hope. So I want all the truckers to know it's going to be a tough call here. It's going to be a hard fight. And we need you to stick with it. All of Canada needs you to stick with it. Not everything has been terrible. The last 2 years have been pretty bad. But for me, there's actually a few good things. I have learned who my real friends are. And I've learned what colleagues I can actually lean on. And I've been able to spend more time with my family and my kids. Now, because of this, I now have a new but massively expanded network of colleagues around the world. And I want you to know, many of them have contacted me, and they wanted me to let you know today that their hope rests with you, especially the Australians and those in New Zealand. We were all formerly great Commonwealth democracies, and they're looking to us. Everybody feels that this is the first time we actually have some kind of movement with teeth to it. And so we need to win this battle. It is not just for Canadians. I want you to know it's for the world. Countries around the world are looking right now at you to see what happens. Now, if you haven't heard, it was announced about a couple of hours ago that our Prime Minister has now tested positive for COVID-19.
Yeah, right.
So I just want to reiterate that. Our triple-vaxxed Prime Minister, who wears his mask and practices physical distancing, is sick with COVID-19.
He's not vaxxed.
And he's trying to tell you, he released that information and he ended his message saying, get the booster. Because he now wants you to believe that the booster is going to keep you from dying. And if you don't, you're going to die. That is scientific garbage. And again, I'm going to tell you why in a moment. But don't listen to him. You can't forget the fact that he told you about the one-dose summer and how incredibly protective one dose was. And then 2 doses was incredibly protective, and he told you that it stopped transmission and that it prevented disease. Now he's left with saying maybe it'll blunt the disease a wee little bit. How much longer are we going to keep following this crazy narrative?
Trudeau's not back. Trudeau is not back.
Okay, so now I want to get a little bit into the science. So again, our Prime Minister Trudeau has told the scientists and the physicians across the country that we don't know how to follow the science. Well, when the AstraZeneca vaccine program was announced, I had 2 senior immunology colleagues that joined me in writing an open letter to Canada, directed at Health Canada, saying, please do not use the AstraZeneca vaccine. There are 10 European countries who are investigating the possibility of serious blood clots. And they did it anyways, and I was told that I was providing disinformation. 3 months later, they shut the program down. And then I was recorded on a radio show, a 7-minute radio show with Alex Pearson. Bless her heart, she was doing her job. She was willing to ask tough questions. And she asked me if there's the possibility that the mRNA vaccines might be linked to heart problems in young people.
Yes.
And I said yes, and I said why I thought it might be. And I have been beat down incessantly ever since. Even though Public Health Ontario now has shut down the Moderna program for males under 30 because it causes too much damage to their hearts. And then somehow they tell us that the Pfizer vaccine is fine. And they tell us publicly it has a 1 in 28,000 chance of causing heart inflammation in young people. That is a vast underestimate. But what they're expecting you to do is forget that they told you with the AstraZeneca vaccine that a 1 in 55,000 chance of causing a serious medical condition was too dangerous for the adults. But now they're telling us that you can have twice a common occurrence, twice as common, a serious issue in young people, and somehow now that's safe. It's ridiculous. And so the only reason why, I had people email me all over when that happened several months later, and now it's on all the labels for all the vaccines about the possibility of heart inflammation. And people said, how did you know? How are you able to predict this? I don't look into a crystal ball. If you actually follow the science, you can see where that path is going to lead to. And so as the scientists, we've been trying to prevent this harm well in advance, but our government is stopping it. Now I want everybody to know, I respect everybody who's been vaccinated and everybody who doesn't want to get the vaccine. If you want to get the vaccine, great. And for those of you who have, I don't hold anything whatsoever against you. You should be able to trust our physicians. You should be able to trust our public health officials. Anybody who got vaccinated and regrets it, don't blame yourself. You did nothing wrong. In fact, you did what you thought was right at the time.
Trudeau's not back.
So now I want to tell you something. This is very important, so listen up. Because what I'm going to share with you is cutting edge data, and this data comes from Public Health Ontario, directly from our public health officials that are giving you this narrative. Their own data. You can look this up on the Public Health Ontario website. So first of all, it's important to understand, they told us this was a pandemic of the unvaccinated. You know why? Because they argued that cases of COVID-19 were occurring disproportionately among the unvaccinated. And you know why? It's because they were testing primarily the unvaccinated. Most of you know this. If anybody had a vaccine exemption and was allowed into school or work, you had to test. Usually about 3 times a week. Some people up to 5 times a week. Guess what? If you have a disease that can occur in 2 groups of people, and you look primarily in one group of people, guess what? You're going to find the problem more often in that one group of people. That's why it appeared to be a pandemic of the unvaccinated. But guess what? So we understand this. Understand that with that bias, in the way they're collecting this data, their current data show that as of December 24th, on Christmas Eve, the lines crossed over on these cases. And the cases, even though it is biased, it clearly shows that COVID-19 is being diagnosed disproportionately among the double vaccinated. That's a fact. Up to 30 to 40% more cases among the double vaccinated than the unvaccinated. And that's accounting for the differences in the population sizes. And so they tell you this is going to help prevent hospitalizations and death. And they tell you that our ICUs are being overloaded, and that's still why you need to be vaccinated. 75% of the people over the last month that have been hospitalized are vaccinated. 75%. And also, over 50% of people that have been admitted into the ICU have been vaccinated. And the other thing that's important, so they'll still argue, well, in the ICU, when you account for the differences in the 2 populations, it's still disproportionately occurring among the unvaccinated. But get this, they just had to admit almost 50% of all cases in our hospitals are not there because of COVID-19. And I'm not even going to go with what they say. They want to tell you that they're there with COVID-19. No, almost 50% of the people are there with positive test results for SARS-CoV-2. Positive test results, not because of COVID-19. They've been lying to us all along. Almost half of the cases right now, and guess what? They will not break that down by vaccination status. And that's a yellow flag. So I wonder how many of those in the ICU might actually be people, for those among the unvaccinated, or how many of those are there just with a positive test result instead of because of COVID-19. And the other thing I want you to know, this is cutting edge data. It's their own data. Not one day in the last 2 years in Ontario has the ICU capacity in this province been reached. It has never been reached. Not on one day. Their own data shows that. And the other thing you need to understand, not on one single day have the people who have been in the hospital, not on one single day has more than half of those people been there because of COVID or just simply with a positive test result. It has always been a minority of the people. And to prove that, if you aren't reaching your capacity, that's wasted cost, that's wasted space. And what they haven't told you, they've actually reduced the ICU bed capacity in Ontario over the past several months. So you need to understand, our ICUs have never been bursting. They've never been at capacity. They're lying about that as well. Their own data shows that they're lying about all these things. Their own data does not meet the narrative whatsoever. The other thing is, when you look at the Canadian data and Ontario data in particular, I'm going to focus on that because that's where we are right now, it shows a complete uncoupling of cases with severe outcomes. Okay? So as we have had progressively record-shattering waves of COVID-19 cases, we have had progressively less and less hospitalizations and deaths. There's been a complete uncoupling. And I want you to understand this is typical for a virus. Think about it. If an organism is going to survive, it doesn't want to kill the host. If it kills the host, it's going to go extinct. So this virus is doing what a virus is supposed to do. You know what it's doing? It's becoming quite contagious. Contagious doesn't mean dangerous. Don't be afraid of something because it's contagious. The common cold is highly contagious. That's what a virus wants. If it can spread among people, then it's going to have a lot more hosts to live in. And it's also going to be progressively less dangerous. Because again, if it kills the host, it's going to go extinct. And this is where we're at. The Omicron variant is that virus. It is like a cold now. It is no worse than a bad cold for the vast majority of people. Remember, even the common cold can be dangerous and life-threatening for the frail elderly and for those who are immunosuppressed, the same high-risk demographic. The flu is much more serious now than the Omicron variant. All right, it's time to focus our attention on the fact that there are other infectious agents out there and there are other diseases that are affecting us to a much greater degree than the Omicron variant ever will. Okay, so this is important. So I want you to know, I have spent lots and lots of time asking people to get up and be willing to talk openly about the science in front of the public so that you can evaluate for yourself whether people like me are lying to you. And nobody, this is telling, not one person has been willing to discuss the science or debate it ever. Not one person. We haven't been able to get anybody to talk openly about the science. The last time I was in Ottawa, I spoke in those Parliament buildings. MP Derek Sloan, bless his heart, had a few of us here. And we were in the Parliament building for a press conference. The press conference was to express concerns about for the first time in Canada, there was massive censorship of physicians and scientists. And it was the most censored press conference in the history of this country. Although despite that, it also ended up being the most viewed video in history coming from the Parliament building.
Yeah.
What I want to tell you, there's one place I've learned where the experts cannot hide, where the experts that are pushing this mandate cannot hide. And where they can't hide is in court. They cannot hide in court. And the reason is when we go into court as expert witnesses, if they don't step forward with their expert witnesses on the other side, there's only going to be evidence on our side. And I want you to know that I've been in a number of court cases, and so I've been up against a number of expert witnesses, including recently, and I'm going to say his name because I don't care. Recently I went toe-to-toe with Dr. Peter Uni, who's the head of the Ontario Science Table. And I'm going to tell you, his report was so awful. I've never seen such a terrible, crappy piece of science in my whole life. And I'm also going to tell you, I'll be honest, Peter Uni, he is definitely an expert epidemiologist. There's no question. And he also, I can guarantee, he has no expertise in virology and immunology and vaccinology, and he should not be making any decisions about vaccines and how you should be using them. And so I want to say, and this has been universal, in all the court cases I've been in, a mountain of science on our side, a molehill of science on their side. And every court case so far, the decision has not been made based on the evidence. They refuse to make the decision based on the evidence, because if they do it based on the weight of the evidence, they have no chance of winning. No chance. And so every case so far, they've been finding a loophole. But I'm telling you with confidence, if we can find a judge that's willing to make a decision based on the weight of the evidence, we will win hands down and easily.
Yeah.
And so I just want to say something. My understanding is this is the camera to look at. So Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, I'm going to offer you an invitation. I will come back to this platform and I will bring 3 to 5 of my friends to debate your best medical and scientific advisors. I want one of them to be Theresa Tam. Bring them up here in front of the Canadians. I'm the vaccinologist who you've called an anti-vaxxer. And I'm the scientist who you says does not follow the science, even though I've been able to predict the danger of these vaccines at every turn. So you bring your medical professionals, your scientific advisors, bring them up here and let Canadians decide whether we do or do not know what we're talking about. And I want to say, the only excuse that I've heard for not doing this is that people don't want to give us a platform and allow us to promote our misinformation to Canadians. Well, guess what, Prime Minister Trudeau? You're hiding. I'm on your front porch. I have your platform. If you want to shut this movement down, you come up here and you prove that we don't know what we're talking about. I want to end with something. Now, I am actually quite embarrassed often. I don't like being in front of people. One of the things I have is Tourette syndrome, and it makes it so I don't like being up in front of people usually. I like the quiet life that I had 2 years ago. And a lot of people tell me that I'm some kind of hero, and I'm not. I want to tell you something. I'm just doing my job, and this is important. I am what's called a public servant, and you need to understand this, the concept, because people have forgotten about this. Our leaders have forgotten about this. You paid. You may not realize this, but as I went through university, taxpayers subsidized 70% of the cost of education in Canada. You paid for 70% of my education. You pay most of the operating expenses for my academic institution, for my university, and you also pay for most of my salary. You have paid me to become deeply educated in the fields that I'm an expert in, and you pay for me to speak the truth to you, uninhibited truth. That's why you pay me to do that, and that's all I've been doing. And what I want you to know, what I want, again, to the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, this is important for you to understand. I am thankful that there's only one thing that you and I have in common, and it's that we are public servants. And thank goodness that's the only thing we have in common. The Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, I want to ask you, what is your definition of servitude? Because you are an elitist, and you think that you can command everything that these people do. You are a public servant. These people here are the VIPs. You need to reverse your philosophy and get it correct. And I'm just going to say one last thing here. I have noticed, and you've probably all noticed, that when Justin Trudeau and all of our medical officers of health get up and talk as this pandemic has gone on, they continually contradict themselves over and over and over again. It's hard to keep track of all the lies. They have flip-flopped so much on so many of the issues that they can't keep track of it anymore, and nothing makes sense anymore. One of the reasons why I can get up here and I can talk off the cuff, I never worry about what I said before. I never worry about whether I say now matches what I said before, because this is what I want you to understand. The truth does not contradict itself. So thank you, everybody. I've been in this fight for 2 years now, and like I said, for the first time in 2 years, I actually feel hopeful. God bless you.
All right, they're going to do a photo, but we want to get the